All right, so today we're going to talk about data centers and optimizing for power at scale. Um, all that words means some cool stuff about power. But first, who are we and who are the people talking to you? So I'm Jack, Director of New Markets here at TestFit. Been here for a hot minute and excited to chat with you all today. New markets essentially means for us different typologies, making sure TestFit can solve any and all things that the world needs. And then Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt. Background before TestFit is in the architecture world. We have a lot of fun things to show off today with our new kind of data center developments, and excited for everybody to be here.
Great. Love it. Yes, we are going to chat today a little bit about industry status and why we're talking about power, although most people are going to know that, but just in case some folks don't, and kind of lead you guys into a little bit of like why power is important and how we can optimize for it in different ways. Through a feasibility process, we're going to talk through some power strategies, get into a little bit of demonstration of how TestFit can help with that, and then a little bit of a roadmap of what's coming for data centers in TestFit. Because for those that don't know, TestFit releases a new version, or an updated version, I should say, every month, except December. We give the engineers off because they deserve it. A lot of releases. Cool. So many of you today are probably coming from the data center industry, or at least interested in the data center industry, which is awesome. Something that when I talk to people in the industry or outside of the industry is kind of hard to grasp is how far we've come with data centers, right? What I mean by that is we've essentially gone from closets to campuses, right? I think of like the old like TV shows, like having like a closet full of like servers, that sort of thing. You're kind of putting it in there. If anyone watched like Silicon Valley on HBO, that kind of fun stuff. They're just building one in their garage and blowing fans on it. And now we're getting a lot more sophisticated, thankfully, and building these huge campuses. I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who said they're building one the size of Manhattan, right? So we have, hop, skipped, and jumped into massive scale really, really quickly. And with that scale, it's really based on demand, right? And hyperscale has become the norm, right? It is what everyone wants to build. It's because we need to do a lot of training for AI and everything else that's kind of being built. And with that, the construction market has just taken off completely. What I think is really interesting, because my background is also in architecture, but I did focus a lot more on retail and that sort of thing, and leasing and pre-leasing and that sort of thing is really important. And what I think is really cool about this graph on the right is just showing, the construction is increasing exponentially, but so is the pre-lease, which is that center column in each chunk. So I think that's really cool to look at. Like the demand is not only there, but it's like ready to commit as we're building, which is really great for all developers. Really cool to start to see that happening. You want that, kind of approach as you start to build. With all of this demand for growth, right, we're starting to get into the power struggles, right? We've all known, power is a big thing in the country and globally, but with these massive hyperscale data centers, we have a lot more power requirements and power needs. And so how are we going to do that? Scale really doesn't come unless you have the power. Love this GIF. I think it's really funny. But hey, TestFit team, I think we want to run this quick poll. I just love to hear from all of you guys, like what type of power are you bringing to the site? Are you sticking with the tried and true utility? Are you starting to look at alternatives? Would love to kind of hear from you all. So I have this gift so you kind of watch a little bit of one of my favorite movies. So we'll give that about a minute to kind of run. But what I'm really interested in is all of these different alternatives that are coming out, right? So we're looking at some of the more traditional ones like wind, solar, that sort of thing, mostly as like secondary or backup power, right? But you've got some cool natural gas like modular plants coming out, geothermal, which is really interesting depending on where you are in the world. I think SMRs are going to be massive, but it's going to be an interesting run, right? There's a lot of like local, pushback on that sort of thing. There's a lot of regulation. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of works. But I'm curious, if you guys want to in the chat too, or if you're implementing these sorts of things, are you doing that as like a stopgap, right? You're only getting enough from the utility, so you want to put a little bit on until you get the rest from the utility. Are you guys doing this, over the long haul, like you're going to implement and keep those? Just be kind of interesting to see. All right, cool. All right, team, I think we can end that and kind of share the results. They look pretty cool to me. Sweet. This is awesome. So yeah, a lot of you are looking to implement, which is kind of where I thought we would land, which is great. And a lot of people are still using utility power. I think this is going to be something cool to track over the next 6, 12, 18 months as power starts to come online, as the grid starts to get flexed a little bit more. Where are we going to go with our power? How are we going to optimize for that? Cool. Awesome. So, with that power, right? Like we have based on some data looking at like the average amount of megawatts per site. It's still about 5 to 10 because a lot of our data centers are still on the smaller side. But when you're looking at these hyperscales, it's 100 megawatts plus, right? We're looking at massive amounts. I mean, we're talking like gigawatts now, which is awesome. And I almost put another Back to the Future GIF in here, 1.21 gigawatts. But everyone kind of knows that one. But that's where we're at, which is super cool to kind of get on there. So, that brings on the question of on-site generation, network capabilities. Do you build these microgrids? Like, what are we starting to do to get to that power? And I think, where that comes from is because of what we're trying to do in feasibility, right? Which means we're starting to look at how can we push through feasibility a lot faster. And so at TestFit, we work with people in feasibility every day, all day. And with data centers, it's really been interesting to work with everyone because it's a little bit of a different process. You're not going and trying to see how much density you can fit on a site, how many units or how much square footage, right? It's more of like, I want to fit as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and then go see what power I can get from the utility, right? So demand by product type is coming in. You're out looking for land. Once you get the land, you're starting to see if the site's going to lay out with your prototypes or anything like that. And then it's a power pitch, right? We're all kind of going in, asking for power, seeing what we can get, and seeing when that power can be outlaid, right? Is it all going to come up front? Or are we going to get that over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And do we start to make decisions on that alternative power, right? Do we bring natural gas onto the site for the next 6, 12 months, that sort of thing? The poll is missing in all of the above. Great point, Greg. We will add that next time. I love it. So when you're starting to do this back and forth, right? You're looking for land, you're trying to find the right site layout, and you're doing that utility pitch. You're not even getting to the city necessarily. Some people are starting to have those conversations, but if you can't find the power, there's almost no point talking to the city yet, right? And so what we've been hearing and what we've been optimizing for here too is the prototype approach, right? We're not into the infill site anymore, which is across all typologies, infill development is very bespoke, right? You're trying to fit unique units, you're trying to do unique angles and things to try and make it work. When it comes to these large campuses, we want to start to productize and prototype. And so when you're building these prototypes, a lot of it comes from one, streamlined site studies, right? You're being able to understand how much power you're going to get really quickly. What that also does for a lot of folks is it increases their operational efficiency. I spoke to some folks the other day who said, we like to have the same building across the site because if there's something wrong in one of these buildings, a fire, a leak, whatever it may be, I want my team to know exactly what door to enter on every single building and exactly what hallway to walk down and exactly what rack to go to, right? I want that fire put out as quickly as possible because that's more valuable to me than like fitting a little bit more onto that site. So really interesting to kind of start to think about it through that lens. It also works for easier leasing. And then of course, faster construction, right? If you're in feasibility and hey, I've got like 10 colo buildings, I've got one hyperscale building, whatever it may be, right? That's probably not the right combination or anything, but you have all of these different types of prototypes on a site, what your purchase order is going to be for your equipment at feasibility. So you can start getting that in motion, especially with our lead times, increasing every single month. So that's really exciting. But with these prototypes, we're starting to get into alternative strategies for cooling. I didn't want to do 2 polls, but would love if you guys want to put it in the chat. What type of cooling you guys are all working with. And I think when we get into those types of things, it actually unlocks a lot of scale. So if you look at this one, this is just a representation, kind of running it through TestFit in here. If you have chili, that's really cool and nice. You've got like forced air, you got water on the chip that needs a little bit more space, right? We're talking like, some more tanks, some more chillers, that sort of thing. And then you start to get into immersion, which I haven't seen super popular yet, but it does add a significant unlock. A little bit hard to see on here. but like forced air, we're looking at about 5 megawatts in that data hall. If we switch it to the same size data hall with water on the chip, we can get about 10 to 15, 10 to 20-ish. And then you're looking at immersion and you're getting 20 megawatts plus in that data hall, right? You can get a lot more density. Your rack density, or even like, your chiller tank density can go up with those different types. So you start to have a similar size building, but as you can see, it's at the cost of more land, right? So we're starting to kind of build into that, cost benefit analysis of, yes, I can get a higher rack density, but do I have the space on the land? Cool. Asking gen yards in the area and chillers, that would be awesome. See, great point. We'll get into all of that kind of fun stuff too. Actual layouts and getting into a lot of the different parameters and that sort of thing. So once you kind of determine that hey, we only do forced air and water on the chip, maybe we want to explore an immersion or something like that. How do we want to bring that power to the site, right? So like, let's say you've gone through the process, you've done your site layout, you have a couple options in here with different cooling types, a couple different prototypes. And let's say you need 500 megawatts for your site and you've gotten 200 from the utility for the first 5 years. They might be able to give you the next, 300 over the, each year after that. Well, what do? Do you only build the 200 megawatts of capacity now, or do you start to bring it online right away? Because like we just talked about, you have leasing capability. You have the ability to pre-lease that. So bringing alternative strategies onto the site, we can talk about temporary power generation. So like your natural gas, your modular plants, you're looking at, some modular, like geothermal or things like that, right? Like there's a lot of different ways to start to bring temporary power generation onto a site. You can start to bring battery backups onto the site, understanding like what I can do to bring those on, add a little bit of a safety net for our developments, and then the SMRs, right? Like a little bit of an unknown across the board. Like what are we going to do with adding, some small modular reactors on the site? Is that really temporary power, or is that actually something we're going to hold on to for a very long time? Right? There's some questions about that, but I think it's going to be really cool as an industry as we start to explore what that is. And it'll be cool to start to test that, right? Put that into practice, start to understand, hey, do we need the utility here? Like, is it even worth going to the utility, or can I speed my site selection process along by just saying, hey, we're going to do an SMR. Let's go straight to the city and start to get approval on that, right? It might make the city conversations longer, but does that cost benefit analysis again run where I've saved enough time by not going to the utility that I can go through the city process, right? I think that's an unknown, but I think it'll be really interesting to see. So now, if you think about it, you've got, let's say, a suite of prototypes, right? They can be single story, multi-story. You can start to play around with that. You've got some of those prototypes that are switching between cooling types. And then you've got, do I do all utility power? Do I start to bring in alternative power? Do I bring in backup power? All of these different types of things. There's a lot of options, right? We're all kind of faced with this little bit of a conundrum of like, okay, there's still a ton of options now that we can do. Where, let's say 5-10 years ago, we were doing mostly infills. There wasn't as many options, right? What can fit on the site, max out the density, start to build and go, right? Now with these larger sites, there's a lot more optionality that we can start to run through when you start to look at all of your different prototypes and things. So all of these different things can be combined in a bunch of different ways, but just wanted to give a visual of like, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot that we can start to build on. There's a lot that we can start to explore. And with that, we want to be able to make sure that we exhaustively test, right? When we talk about feasibility, especially your TestFit, when I was working at a previous company, I used to joke when I left, we were on option 176 of one of our sites, right? That is a lot of testing, but we wanted to be sure we got the right plan and move forward with the right plan. We want to optimize. We want to make sure that we're, de-risking our portfolio and making sure that we're pushing forward on the right plan, especially when it comes to data centers. If we're going to go and request power, we're going to be kind of tied into that, right? So let's make sure we get to the right plan as quickly as possible. And so that's where TestFit comes in. That's, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I believe that being able to have those prototypes built into an algorithm that can then run, give you feedback, real-time feedback on the power capacity that you're speccing, looking at, alternative ways to add power to the site. So we'd love to give you guys a little bit of a demonstration Because I'm talking too much, I'm going to give the mic to Matt and let him kind of show you guys what's going on. But feel free as we're running, put questions in the chat. I already see a couple. I'll start to get to them as Matt's doing his beautiful work here in a sec. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I give that to you, Matt.
Here we go. 1 second. Is it showing like dark areas on the screen? Are we good? We're good now. Sweet. Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, we'll go through and kind of unpack what he kind of talked through in the slides and show how we can start to apply these to the different sites right now. So what you're seeing right now is inside of TestFit. We kind of have a few things kind of pre-built just to kind of get it going, but we'll start to modify all of these and show how we can apply those prototypes he was talking about, create certain areas within there for like the additional power, and just kind of generally show you how we can start to go through site feasibility for data centers and use the kind of custom templates that you have for your own sites. So with inside of TestFit, this is kind of where we are right now. A few things just to kind of point out for us is keep an eye down here on the bottom. This is going to be our tabulations for the site. So whenever I have a site active, we'll see all of the information for it. We'll see the data center power requirements over here on this side and some other kind of requirements on there. At the very end of this, we'll get a bit into this as well. We are running some cut and fill analysis on the site with all these buildings as well. And we'll kind of talk through some of that as we kind of just progress through this demo itself. So we're going to start over here on site A. So this is kind of showing one of the prototypes that Jack had shown on here. Here we have a data center. We have a few different bay styles on each of the ends, actually on all 4 sides. And we'll kind of show how we can start to customize that. So with inside of TestFit, what is happening is once we have that site defined, we have the ability to go in and start to change different aspects of the site. So it could be anything from a setback. So if I were to, let's say, click on one of these numbers down here on the bottom, this is showing this setback that we have off of this road. If I want it to be 150 feet, I'm just making a large number for fun. We can see what's happening is the site itself is actually solving around this now. So it's removing that from that solvable area. We're getting to see those kind of data centers shrink and grow depending on the size. And we're also seeing that data power at the bottom over here as I'm moving that change to reflect that. So that's kind of what Jack was getting into, is quickly kind of understanding what it takes to run that site and getting that output. And we'll start to emphasize this even more once we start changing into the different prototypes that we have, but we'll kind of get into how we start to create and make those. So for a building itself, we can see over here, we have the data center selected. We can always go on to, let's say, this office space over here. We have a width that's designated for it. We can grow that as needed. So we're just kind of grabbing these points and stretching this. They can grow kind of any direction that we want. So we're giving that option to go in and customize that. If you wanted to as well, we can select a data center. Let's say if I didn't have office over here, I'm just going to delete it. You're going to see it's removed from all of these. What I can do is I can go to my data center building itself. I can add a style of in bay that I want. You can see we just have in bay, dock, yard, and green space. We're going to add another in bay. And then we get to pick the side that we want. And we're just going to choose, let's choose right for right now. Cool. And so you can see over here, right now it's called a speed bay. I'll change this back over to office. We'll give it a new color that we want. And this color is going to be kind of in the 2D plan. And then what we can do is we can set what the width of that is. Let's say it's 50 feet. And then we could either adjust those over to the offsets. We could set that to 0. We can go beyond what the initial building is for, whatever the reasoning of your prototype may be. And now we have that kind of applied to all of these spaces on this site as well. So let's say we've gone through the time, we've added these custom buildings, we've changed all of our dimensions. Another thing that we have that's kind of key for data centers as well is everything that you're seeing here is set by a parameter on this left side. So we'll take the kind of main data hall that we have over here in this middle part. That's going to be set by the size of bays that we have. Within TestFit, this right here is considered a bay between these dash lines. So you can see we're going a few bays wide and then a single bay deep right now, which is kind of reflected from the side over here. These can be adjusted. So if your prototypes do have a deeper kind of bay on one side, I've changed that to 2. And again, you're seeing kind of these things pop around within TestFit itself, but it's just kind of showing that we can change what these bays are. And we're updating that prototype. Every time that's happening, we're getting a new power calculation down here on the bottom. We're getting a new layout for the buildings, given the constraints that are popped around there, which would be the setback and a couple of these kind of substations, which we'll talk about. But you're getting that kind of instant feedback when we're making these adjustments on here. And I'm going to lower this back down to 2, so we can keep it kind of narrow on there. So let's say we've made these adjustments. We've gotten to our prototype. And also, if you have questions, feel free to ask them as we go. Jack will shoot them out to me and we'll kind of get an answer for you, or answer it kind of live with the demo itself. So once you kind of get to this portion of creating that custom building, setting your standards and all the sizes and dimensions of your base correctly, what we can do is we can actually save all of this as what we call a preset inside of TestFit. So once that happens, I can go down here to the bottom, and this is where you save a preset, and then we would just save that locally. So now we would have that preset saved anywhere. That preset now is kind of saved to TestFit itself, your file only. And then we could apply that to different sites. So let's say I were to select this site that's over here, kind of in the middle. What we can do now is if I were to go to here, this dropdown, we can see we have a few different types that we've already saved out today. A couple of the kind of different cooling methods that we had kind of shown on here. And so if I wanted to, I could see what this site looks like as is right now. I'm going to go to our schemes tab. What schemes do for us within inside of TestFit is how you look at those multiple options that kind of Jack got into. So we'll go over here, we'll go to our site. And then now what I'm going to do for this one is I'm just going to change this to a different prototype that we have. So we'll do, there's a lot happening on this one, but we'll start to make adjustments. So we can see we can go through any one of these. We're seeing these really large areas start to kind of populate on here. And then again, we can go in and make those changes as needed. So we could see how that one was just kind of displaying those new prototypes as we go along. One thing that I wanted to show that's kind of, it's showing on the site right now, but we also have this idea of spaces being placed on the site. And Jack, feel free to also comment on these as we're kind of going through it. So what's happening right now is we've placed these extra spaces on the site to represent substations, because we are looking at about 265 acres. We're going to need some of these kind of throughout that site. The way that these work is just like how we have anything else. As these move around, depending on where it's located, you can see we're getting the solves of these buildings placed. You notice when it can fit a building, sometimes something like this, it will place that. How that's being placed is driven by how many bays wide and deep we have. So I'll change these all back to 2. And let's say we wanted to be 3 at the minimum. So now it's not going to place that smaller building over there. I'll get one to place, but we can see it's actually 3 bays wide now instead of the 2 bay that it was earlier. So I wanted to point out the ability to add in these other spaces that might not be data centers, but they're kind of supporting spaces that help that site as well.
Yeah, great point, Matt. And when you're building those substations too, you guys can save those, right? So, we've talked with folks, and different utilities have different size constraints. These are pretty rectilinear, so you can adjust the dimensions on there. You can kind of see that 400 by 600, but you can save that as a space within TestFit and just go ahead and place them. But Matt, do you want to show them how, like, if you want to do like something in like a weird corner, maybe like and do like a triangular sized one? I've seen some funky stuff out there.
Yeah, let me just pull away from here. I'm actually gonna remove some of the site. Give me just a second.
Yeah. And when you're doing that, basically what that allows you to do is if you click one of your forms, you can basically redraw it in any form that you want. So you can draw a rectangle, you can draw a triangle, square, whatever it may be. And that just allows you to kind of do some funky things with it, which makes it a lot more customizable based on, the site that you need. There you go. Nice. Almost looks like a Pac-Man.
I just drew it as awful as I could on purpose. So what he's kind of referring to is over here. So I could save this locally. I did substations with a shape on there because it's not a great shape. And now what I can do is if I go to any of these other ones that I have, we have this database that we have over here. And I can click on that. And now it's replaced that with that other one. So not only are there databases for the buildings that we have, those supporting spaces that you need to kind of fill out that site, we also have the ability to kind of save those and then use those between sites as well. Another thing that kind of Jack started getting into was the addition of additional power areas on here. So right now we can see within this site kind of what we're at in terms of the totals and kind of what we would need for that site itself. If we don't have enough power, maybe we have too many buildings on the site that it can't be supported. There's ways to remove areas from that site and use it for those other spaces like Jack had kind of alluded to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, in Tesla, we call these regions. So I'm going to add another region. What that just means is I'm just creating an area within my site that I want something else to live. Essentially like what we're looking at with those, we'll add a region here. And on this region, we can do a couple things. I could just leave it blank, which just means we're going to place nothing inside of there. So now we have it's actually officially blank. Hold on a second. For now, we're just going to put let's say park space, and we're going to turn off our trees for now. Trees, I know we
there
love
goes our forest.
trees are great. We love them. Don't get me wrong. So we've kind of excluded this space over here. You can see also that the buildings are still kind of reacting to that space that's been kind of removed, just so we can kind of see how that's acting. And now what I'm going to do is within this space, I'm going to add a couple of those other elements that Jack mentioned, the temporary kind of power generation, also the potential kind of battery storage that you could have within the site itself. So I'm going to go and add an additional space over here. And right now I'm just kind of drawing it to take up a portion of this. You can see I can be pretty rough with the outline of it because we're just kind of placing it within that other site. So right here, I'll start with, this says truck parking and energy production. We'll do this one, solve. So what we're looking at here is kind of those kind of areas that Jack was showing where we had additional parking. This is a large area for this space, so I'm just going to kind of reduce this a bit. But what we're seeing is if it doesn't fit, you'll kind of see some of these pieces pop through. But so what we're looking at here is just the ability to kind of add those in another area. So right here, what we've added is we've created a parking lot. This parking lot, we've set dimensions that we want for the size itself. Sorry, let me just kind of push all this over a bit, just so it's kind of reactive a bit more to what we're seeing here. Perfect. There we go. So what I just wanted to show here is the ability to kind of go in and add these additional spaces. So right now we have a parking stall. We set a length and a width. With the parking stalls themselves, we have ability to add these additional buffers because if we need those within that stall. And so we can see how it's starting to kind of lay out this area within this kind of space itself. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this space that we have here. And I'm just going to duplicate. I'm going to drag this down a bit just so there's something kind of roughly close to it. I've duplicated the exact space. So this is kind of what we're seeing on here, but I'm going to change this over to be something else for us. We'll go to this side and we're going to change this to our, and we built this using our other configurator here, and here's our battery storage. So this is kind of what Jack was getting to as well. And I might swap these, but we'll just kind of take a look at it in 3D. So here, kind of same general idea. We can set dimensions for driveways. We can set dimensions of these boxes that are being populated. So we can kind of see one, how many kind of battery units we have by checking these down here on the bottom. We're at about 276 on this one. But still, it's just kind of one of those things you can go in and kind of quickly see, do I have enough power, like temporary power to fit with inside of here? What do I need for that one? And then kind of where can I start to put other elements of this as well, like what we're seeing right now with these kind of battery places being put on the site. And what's happening?
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
No, yeah, sorry, Matt, you're on a roll. I didn't want to throw you off, but
No,
so
you're good.
we're getting some questions related to this, which is how do you guys optimize for, or are we able to tell you if you need additional substations or support stations? At the moment, no. There's something that's coming that will help with this in the future. But right now, based on feedback from folks, a lot of utilities have different ratios and that sort of thing based on that, and whether you need, depending on what you're doing, how much capacity you need, that kind of fun stuff. So right now they're static inputs, but you can let TestFit solve around them. So you can start to put them in if you know that you're targeting 400 megawatts and you need 2 substations. Go ahead and place those substations, and then, like Matt said, you can solve around it, and you can even swap out the prototype that you're doing while keeping those substations static, which is pretty cool. So it allows you to start to make some changes really quickly, and Matt's going to kind of run through that. So you can start to place those, interior to the site, which makes that a little bit easier. We got another question in here, Matt, too, about are we optimizing for power, cooling, and space? Yes, to a degree. And what I mean by that, Dana, is you can build your prototypes, right, based on the types of cooling, right? We're not necessarily speccing the type of cooling for you because we don't know what you're necessarily putting into that building. But when you're doing that, TestFit can then run a generative analysis with those prototypes. We haven't really gotten into that part of it yet. We're mostly been showing you how to build your components, which is where most folks spend about a month kind of getting into understanding how to build their components into TestFit. Our team helps folks get that set up. And then from there, generative design within TestFit takes those prototypes, takes even your past files, and uses that as logic to understand how to place your buildings across the site. So there's a bit of a degree to that, and we're happy to show you that too on another call as well, just setting up all of your prototypes and understanding how that generative analysis will work. I hope that answers your question, Dana and Anthony. And some folks are asking for case studies. We'll absolutely send those across. We have those for a bunch of different typologies, so you guys can start to see all of that within the TestFit ecosystem for sure. Yeah, of course. No, you're welcome.
Thanks. Another one thing that I wanted to point out real quick, just because some of this was already, we kind of made this beforehand. What you're seeing here as well is we have this roads tool, and this is kind of a great tool to use when creating these much larger campuses that have additional circulation, or even kind of subdividing them as needed. So what the roads editor does, I'm not going to get into it too much. You can create these custom road profiles. These road profiles can be saved as well. And now what they do is the roads, they're not just kind of the circulation around the site. Let's say this one, kind of what Jack was mentioning, power demands might not have enough, even if you have additional energy generation coming in, or it might just not be worth it. What we can do is we can take that, and then now we can start to break these sites up. So with that roads tool, you can see I've just drawn an additional road. I've broken this larger site up into 2 additional ones. I can now click inside of this one. And then what we can do from here is, this is kind of where Jack was talking about using a bit of our generative design stuff with your, let me just pop up one of these generative design stuff. Let's say we're going to do just pure cloud storage that I have. We selected that. And then now what we have is the ability to adjust some of these ranges as needed. So right now, and let me see, make some of these adjustments. Perfect. So min and max deep. I'm going to change these up to 2, just so we can kind of take a look at that. I am going to remove the parking because we don't need the parking around that site right now. And then we'll start to see how generative design can kind of help us with trying to potentially flex some of these these pieces to kind of see what fits for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle this over here on this left. I've now enabled this parameter over here to be a design, or a one that flexes. And then we can start to kind of change this by either critical power needed, or we can change it to any other kind of piece that we would want to filter and sort by. So now what's happening is over here on this left, and I'm going to kind of make it so we see it's kind of larger bar. Perfect. And so now what we can see is if I start to hover over these, I'm sorting by critical power. And as I go down, we can start to see it's going to show me the largest building it can fit on that site, essentially, given how much power we have. And so as I go down, we're going to see these different varieties of buildings show up. Some of them might be similar, some might be, you can see, much smaller. What's happening is now TestFit is flexing this to kind of see what best fits for your site, without you having to do much in there, other than kind of setting a range that you want for there. So I can say I want a building of max size of this, minimum of this one, to follow along with your prototype. And what generative design is going to do for you is it's just going to flex between those different options. You can kind of pick one as you want, save that as what we had seen as a scheme earlier, and then kind of continue to move on with your designs.
Yeah, great point, Matt. And so that is like generative focused, right? Like it allows you to say, hey, we like most of what we did in our site. We want to start to test XYZ parameter, right? And stay really, really focused on that. What generative design on the base case does too is it takes all of your prototypes and will spin through all of them on the site. So it gives you a lot more options than even what that was showing. But so you can stay as focused or as general as you'd like on that. We did get 2 other questions. So just want to answer those real quick. So there's a question about our models being able to address noise contouring and light trespass and some other of those smaller issues. Right now, we don't get into that sort of thing within TestFit. We are laser focused on trying to get you most amount of buildings, most amount of megawatts capable on that site within your constraints, right? So within your prototypes, that sort of thing. So, we've talked about this before, and maybe Matt, on this site, you can kind of cycle through that change button to kind of cycle through different orientations, right? So we can start to look at what those can be within TestFit. You can start to see it's going to vary it while still trying to show you the highest and yield on that site. But, for things like wind and noise and that kind of stuff, you may want to angle the site that isn't as lucrative to the site, but solves those types of issues. So we can do it a little bit, but we don't necessarily put that into the solver itself. When we get into EMEA and APAC requirements, it just kind of depends on where you're at in the world and what we can accomplish. We have folks using TestFit in both of those regions. So happy to kind of run through that with anyone that's interested. But yeah, so we're trying to put as much variability in there as we can, getting into, optimal layouts as quickly as we can.
Yeah. And I know we touched on cut and fill a bit earlier, but I just wanted to show where some of that data is coming from. So over here on this right side, we do also have quite a bit of data that you can use to kind of help make these decisions. We'll see we have parcels. So parcels, you can enable those. So if you're using a kind of pre-planned parcel, you can do that one. You combine multiple parcels. We also have elevations. So this is where we're getting some of our data from. Hovering over these kind of shows where that line is. We can tone down the site plan a bit so we can see how that's affecting it, but we can start to see some of this information, how it's kind of starting to be adjusted. Going a bit farther down, flood zones, we'll turn on some of this. I'll back out just a bit. Looks like there's a nice flood zone over here. But we can start to see some of this information. If I were to zoom in, this is probably going to turn nice blue because we are located next to a dam at this location. And then a few other ones just kind of go down this list over here. So zoning requirements, U.S. soils, and then also U.S. power plants. So now if I back up a bit and I hover over this power plant that's right next to us, you can see it's a hydroelectric plant. it'll put in the kind of capacity that it has on there. So you can get a general idea of what we're looking at in terms of what's available within that area. And if we zoom out a bit farther, you'll start to see different power plants shown within the region that you have, if you're interested to know where those are, the information is kind of coming from.
Yeah, great point, Matt.
Mhm.
This might actually be a great time to kind of jump back into some of our roadmap features of what's to come, but feel free to keep putting questions in there and kind of get into all of that, and we're happy to answer those too. But just wanted to kind of show you guys what's coming out. Two questions actually real quick, Dana. Thank you. This one is about
I'll
fully
reshare just in case.
rendering the site. We actually don't do rendering inside of TestFit. What you're seeing is just a basic massing model, but we help folks get to that sort of render. There's a ton of cool tools out there to kind of take our models and run them through. And you can do that by exporting TestFit as just an image, which a lot of them can take, or we export into SketchUp if you want to do a higher quality render, that sort of thing. Also into Revit, and we have a DXF for your 2D straight into CAD. So a lot of variability in there. You can also get an Excel of your data and a PDF of your project in there too, so you can start to work on it downstream. As far as tying into, so that's a great lead in, Craig. Thank you for the question. So the question was, can your software tie into and download from a local GIS record, that sort of thing? Matt, do you want to just toggle on real quick the data layer for parcels? And so what we bring in is all of your assessor parcel maps for the US right now. So we don't have that necessarily for, and Canada. We don't have that for EMEA or APAC just yet. But what this allows you to do is select those parcels. So you're seeing a little bit of a gray area. There you go. So those are all of your parcels that have been platted. If it's a new parcel, you'll have to put that in. You can always define your site with the roads like Matt showed earlier. You can define it with these parcels. You can draw it freehand, or you can even type in your meets and bounds, right? So if you have your legal description, feel free to toss that in there too. Makes that pretty
Oh,
easy to get that to work.
I'll say it's the least fun way of putting it in, just to toss that out there. It's zero fun.
It is the least fun because legal descriptions are tough. If you've ever had to draw a legal description in AutoCAD too, it's also tough. But so then we also have zoning in here too. You know, the fun part about data centers and why we don't necessarily show it as much is that zoning in for data centers is a little bit of a gray area, if you will, right? Depends on where you're at, what you're doing. Is it industrial? Does it need its own zoning? Are we up zoning? Like, what are we doing? But we do include zoning, so you can start to see that green area coming in. That's going to show you the zone over on the left-hand side, like Matt's showing. In our zoning panel, you can actually open that up and see different attributes from that. So it does bring in a lot of data. You can then click on that link. It takes you into the zoning, so you can start to do a little bit of a deeper dive too. Cool. So let me kind of switch gears here real quick. Matt, I'm gonna steal the screen from you. Let me go ahead and share my screen once more. And so, you know, we've built a lot in the TestFit, right? We're trying to build as quickly as we can and meet the market demand, make sure that you all can understand exactly what you can do on a site. And Anthony, what a great question. Anthony just asked, do you have any existing utility data? You are right on the money, sir. We are bringing that to TestFit in our next release. We're very excited about it. This will actually be global utility data. So what you're seeing here is a zoomed out view of just the US. What you'll get is pipelines for oil, gas, water. You'll get power. You'll start to see substations. You'll still see the power generation plants that Matt was showing earlier with those dots, but also an outline of the area. You can hover over it. You can start to draw easements off of them. You can do, you know, as the crow flies measurements from your site to those. So really cool to start to bring that in a TestFit. So that'll be coming in our next release as well. So we're excited for that. We're also doing some increases in our layout yield. So what Matt showed is awesome, right? Like we're being able to solve really quickly, but we've made some improvements to some of our other layout algorithms over the last few months that we're going to be bringing now to data centers as well. For things like townhomes and parking, we've increased the yield on a layout, especially on the more non-standard layouts, anywhere from 15 to 30%. So excited to bring that to data centers as well. We're always trying to improve. So excited to see that. And then more end bay capabilities. So like what Matt was showing, we call them end bays, but really they're just like your edge uses, right? Your main use is going to be your data hall and then your yard, right? For your mechanical, but like how can we add more capabilities to that, start to get into some of the more, you know, niche things that we kind of talked about, being able to bring in other uses, that kind of fun stuff. So that's all coming. There's more coming too, but those are the things that we're most excited about over the next couple months. Another question, Craig. Yeah, so we did get an investment from Prologis a couple of years ago when we were raising our Series A, and excited to kind of bring them on board. There's a few resources we can send you to kind of talk through that. So our team will follow up with that as well. Yeah, great questions all around. Happy to kind of hop on a call with anyone. Feel free to reach out to our team. Anyone on our team is well versed in data centers now, so we can always hop on a call, run through your sites, see if this is going to work for you. But stay in touch. Like, follow us on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn if you want. Stay connected. Always love to chat. If you guys are starting to get into some weird, crazy power things, love to just like see what's going on. Make sure that we're staying up to date, because at the end of the day, you guys are the ones on the ground making sure things get built, and I'm just excited to use faster internet. You know what I mean? So we're excited to kind of help you guys and do whatever we can. So always feel free to give feedback, reach out. It was fun to spend the morning with everyone. Cool. All right. Any questions we didn't get to? I've seen a couple come in. We'll absolutely reach out over email just to make sure we get those all covered. But thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up today. It's been great.